A gate agent's power is absolute. For 10 minutes, she is the judge, jury, and executioner of your travel plans. But for Aura Wing agent Brenda Scanlon, that power trip just hit turbulence when 19-year-old black twins, Marcus and Maya, were denied boarding on their first-class flight to Zurich. Brenda thought she was just putting a couple of entitled kids in their place. She didn't know their father was Robert Washington, and she didn't know that with one phone call, he had the power to pull the plug, not just on their flight, but on her entire terminal. This isn't just a story about a bad day at the airport. This is what happens when systemic bias writes a check its power can't cash, and the karma that comes to collect is catastrophic. The air in Chicago O'Hare's International Terminal 5 always felt different. It was thinner, charged with the nervous energy of 1,000 different timelines colliding. It smelled of stale Cinnabon, jet fuel, and the faint, ozonic tang of industrial floor polish. For Marcus and Maya Washington, it was the smell of opportunity. At 19, they were a study in focused intensity. Identical twins, they shared a height of just over 6 feet, a lean, athletic build honed by collegiate track, and a quiet confidence that often unsettled people. Today, they were dressed in the future mogul casual their father had always joked about. Dark wash jeans, crisp Stanford University sweaters, Maya's in cardinal red, Marcus's in graphite grey, and matching leather duffel bags that cost more than the monthly rent for their Palo Alto apartment. They were in first class, but not as a luxury. It was a necessity. They were flying to Zurich for the final round interviews of the prestigious Kalen Maya Tech Fellowship. It was a life-changing opportunity, one that would guarantee funding for their nascent AI-driven logistics platform. They needed to land rested, sharp, and ready. Their father, a man who understood the value of a first impression, had insisted on the front cabin. Gate M11, Maya murmured, checking the Aura Wing app on her phone. Looks like boarding just started. Zone 1. Perfect, Marcus replied, adjusting the strap of his duffel. I just want to get on, get my noise cancellers on, and review my opening pitch one last time. They navigated the crowded concourse, a seamless unit parting the sea of stressed-looking families and weary business travelers. Gate M11 was a pressurized bubble of activity. The premium boarding lane, marked by a plush red rope, was empty save for the gate agent standing at the podium. Her name was Brenda Scanlon. Brenda had been working this gate for Aura Wing for 22 years. She had started when the airline was a scrappy underdog, and she remained while it became a global titan. In that time, her hair had grayed from brunette to a tight, gunmetal grey bun, and her patience had worn down to a fine, sharp point. Brenda was a gatekeeper in the most literal sense. She didn't just facilitate travel, she permitted it. She was the immovable object, the final boss of M11, and she harbored a deep, simmering resentment for the world that had passed her by. Her day had been a cascade of minor disasters. A catering delay on the Dubai flight, a broken printer, and a dressing down from her supervisor, Gary Pinter, about passenger engagement scores. Then she saw them, 2 tall, young, black kids. They moved with an easy, unbothered grace, and they were heading straight for her first-class lane. Brenda felt the familiar, acidic prickle of assumption. 22 years, she thought, and the types never change. In her experience, young passengers in first class fell into 2 categories: insufferable influencers, vlogging every second, or credit card fraudsters, flying on stolen miles. These 2, with their expensive bags and matching sweaters, practically screamed entitled. They probably weren't even 21. "Hi," Maya said, her voice bright and professional, as she and Marcus approached the podium. She held out her phone, the QR code for her boarding pass glowing. Brenda did not look up. Her eyes were fixed on her computer screen, her fingers tapping a staccato rhythm on the keyboard. 1 moment. The moment stretched into a deliberate, uncomfortable 30 seconds. Brenda was performing a classic power play, the willful ignorance of presence. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice deeper than his sister's, but just as polite. "We're in Zone 1, just wanted to scan." Brenda finally lifted her head. Her eyes were pale blue, magnified by wire-rimmed glasses, and held a look of profound, practiced boredom. She scanned Maya's phone. Beep. Then she scanned Marcus's. Beep. She stared at her screen. She frowned. It was a small, theatrical expression, the kind that signaled a problem. "There's a problem," she said, her voice a flat monotone. Maya's smile wavered. "A problem?" "We checked in this morning. Everything was confirmed. The system says otherwise," Brenda said, tapping her acrylic nail against the monitor. "Your tickets have been flagged." "Flagged?" Marcus asked, stepping closer. "Flagged for what?" "A random security protocol," Brenda said, using the magic, unchallengeable words. "It means your names aren't clearing the supplementary passenger manifest. It's a system-wide TSA flag. I can't board you." This was, of course, a complete and utter lie. There was no system-wide TSA flag. There was, however, a small, little-used button on her terminal, labeled Manual Flag for Review. Brenda had pressed it the moment she saw the F designator next to their names. It was a discretionary tool, meant for passengers who seemed intoxicated or were causing a disturbance. For Brenda, it was a scalpel. It gave her an excuse to say no. That's not possible," Maya said, her composure starting to crack. She pulled up their confirmation email, their seat assignments, 1A and 1B. "Look, we're right here. Seats 1A and 1B, paid in full." "It doesn't matter what your app says, honey," Brenda said, the faux sympathetic "honey" landing like a slap. "It matters what my system says, and my system says you're not getting on this plane." "But this is—" "We have to be in Zurich by tomorrow," Marcus said, his voice rising a fraction. "We have a—" "Everyone has somewhere to be." Brenda cut him off, her voice hardening. She gestured to the back of the now growing economy line. "You'll need to step aside and call the reservations hotline. They'll have to rebook you once your flag is cleared." "Step aside," Maya echoed, her voice trembling with a mixture of confusion and fury. "Rebooking isn't an option. We have to be on this flight." "That won't be possible," Brenda said. She tore the small paper receipt from her printer and held it out, not to them, but to the air between them. "As I said, you need to step aside. You're holding up my boarding process." She had done it. She had taken these two entitled first-class kids and put them back in their place. She had reasserted the natural order of things, where she was the one in control. Marcus and Maya looked at each other. The shared, silent communication of twins passed between them. This is not a mistake. This is a choice. "No," Marcus said, his voice quiet but immobile. "We're not stepping aside." Brenda's eyes narrowed. This was not part of the script. "Sir, if you refuse to follow my instructions, I will call security." "Call them," Maya said, her own spine snapping rigid. "And you should also call your supervisor, because you've just made a very, very big mistake." Brenda almost laughed. She picked up the phone receiver at her podium. "Oh, I'm sure I have, dear." She pressed a button. "Gary, I've got a situation at M11. 2 passengers, refusing to deboard the lane. Yes, belligerent." She slammed the phone down and gave them a thin, triumphant smile. "He'll be right here, and then you'll be moved." In the back of the line, A man named Tim Brody, on his way to a sales conference in Frankfurt, discreetly lifted his phone. This felt like more than just an overbooked flight. He hit record. Gary Pinter moved through the terminal not like a manager, but like a ghost. He was a man in his mid-40s, perpetually clad in a slightly too large Aura Wing blazer, a pale yellow tie, and an expression of mild, apologetic panic. Gary wasn't a leader. He was a conflict diffuser. His entire professional life was dedicated to smoothing things over, to finding the path of least resistance, and to ensuring that no complaint ever made it to his boss, the station director. He arrived at gate M11 to find exactly what he dreaded, a bottleneck. A line of impatient Zone 2 passengers was spilling out into the concourse, and at the head of the premium lane stood Brenda, her arms crossed in a picture of righteous indignation, facing two very tall, very young, and very black passengers. Gary's stomach did a familiar, unhappy lurch. This, he thought, is a Code 3. Code 3 was his own internal shorthand for any situation involving a minority passenger and a senior staff member. They were unwinnable. "Brenda, what's the, situation?" he asked, adjusting his tie. "Supervisor Pinter," Brenda said, her voice dripping with formal procedure. "These two passengers, Mr. and Ms. Washington, were flagged by the TSA security manifest." She tapped her screen again. "The system has locked their tickets. I advised them to step aside and call reservations, and they have refused. They are blocking my boarding process for Flight 112. Gary looked at the twins. They did not look belligerent. They looked furious and composed. It was a combination that made him deeply nervous. "Mr. and Ms. Washington?" he said, plastering on his managerial concern smile, which looked more like a grimace. "Gary Pinter, customer service supervisor. I understand there's a bit of a hiccup with your tickets." "A hiccup?" Maya repeated, her voice dangerously level. "Your agent, Ms. Scanlon, told us we're on a TSA security list. We've been through global entry and clear. We've never had a single issue. It's impossible." "Well, impossible is a strong word," Gary said, attempting a light chuckle. It died in his throat. "These new DHS protocols, they're just a maze, aren't they? Sometimes they just ping, for no reason. It's almost always a false positive." "So clear the false positive," Marcus said. "We have our passports. We have our fellowship invitations. We have our father's corporate credentials. We have whatever you need to see." Gary's eyes twitched at the mention of corporate credentials, but he held his ground. Siding against a senior agent like Brenda was a headache. It meant paperwork. It meant Brenda would make his life miserable for a month. The easier path was to make the passengers the problem. "Now, sir, I can't just clear a federal flag," Gary said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, as if letting them in on a big secret. That's out of my hands. It's a homeland security matter." He was lying, but it was a good, solid, bureaucratic lie. It was unprovable. "So what's the solution?" Maya asked. "We miss our flight? We lose our fellowship? All because your agent decided, when she looked at us, that we were a security risk?" The air became electrically still. Maya had said the quiet part out loud. Brenda Scanlon gasped, a theatrical, sharp intake of air. "How dare you! I have never—" Gary Pinter held up a frantic hand. "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Let's not make this personal. This is not about that. It's not about anything other than a computer-generated flag." "Then why?" Marcus asked, his voice a low, cold rumble. "Did she press a button on her keyboard to create the flag the second we walked up? I saw her do it. Before she even scanned our passes, she was already typing. Brenda's face, for the first time, showed a flicker of genuine panic. She hadn't realized he'd been watching that closely. "That is a vicious accusation," Brenda sputtered. "I was logging into the passenger manifest. Gary, I will not be accused of this. This is harassment." Gary saw his comfortable, easy morning evaporating. He had to shut this down. He dropped the friendly manager facade and adopted the regrettable authority voice. "Sir, ma'am," he said, addressing the twins as if they were unruly children. "I am the ranking supervisor here. I am telling you that Miss Scanlon is a 20-year veteran with an impeccable record." This was also a lie. Brenda had more complaints filed against her than any agent in Terminal 5, but she was also protected by her union seniority. "The system shows a flag. My agent's hands are tied. My hands are tied. There is nothing more I can do at this gate." He motioned to 2 O'Hare police officers who were slowly ambling over, having been quietly waved down by Brenda. "Now," Gary continued, "you have 2 choices. You can step aside, make your phone call to reservations, and we can all get on with our day. Or you can continue to impede a federal boarding process, at which point I will have to ask these officers to escort you from the gate for trespassing. And believe me, you will be on a no-fly list after that." It was the ultimate checkmate. He had backed them into a corner. He had used the system, the police, and the threat of real, career-ending consequences to silence them. The other passengers were watching, rapt. Tim Brodie's phone was still recording, capturing every word of Gary's smarmy, threatening speech. Maya looked at Marcus. Her eyes were shining with unshed, furious tears. This was it. They were going to lose. Their entire future derailed by this bitter woman and this weak man. "Marcus," Maya whispered, her voice breaking. "What do we do?" Marcus looked at Gary's smug, apologetic face. He looked at Brenda's triumphant sneer. He looked at the officers, who now stood imposingly behind them. And he thought of his father. Robert Washington was a man who had built a global logistics empire from a single, rusty delivery van. He had a guiding principle, a motto that he had drilled into his children since they could walk. Never let a small mind block a big future. And when they try, do not argue. Escalate. Go straight to the top. Marcus had never understood the top until this very second. "It's okay, Maya," he said, his voice suddenly calm. He pulled his own phone from his pocket. "It's time to make a phone call." "Good," Gary Pinter said with a patronizing nod. "Call reservations. They'll get you sorted out." "Oh," Marcus said, his thumb hovering over the first number in his favorites. "I'm not calling reservations." He locked eyes with Gary. "Call Dad." Robert Washington was not in a good mood. He was in the 48th floor boardroom of the Cygnus Logistics Tower in downtown Chicago, a sheer glass and steel monolith that overlooked Lake Michigan. He was supposed to be on a flight to Shanghai, but a last-minute snag in a multi-billion-dollar port automation deal had kept him grounded. He was currently on a high-stakes, 12-person video conference with the board of the Shanghai Port Authority. The translators were struggling. The C-suite executives were posturing. The deal was teetering on a knife's edge of cultural misunderstanding and corporate ego. Robert Washington, CEO and founder of Cygnus Logistics, was a man of imposing presence. He was tall, like his children, with a shaven head and a meticulously tailored suit that did little to hide the build of a man who had once loaded his own trucks. When he spoke, his voice was a deep, resonating bass that commanded silence. Right now, his personal phone, a sleek black device resting face down on the polished mahogany table, began to vibrate. A normal CEO would have ignored it. A normal CEO would have had his assistant field the call. Robert Washington was not a normal CEO. He had one rule. If his children called, he answered. Always. He had left boardrooms, shareholder meetings, and even a dinner with a sitting senator to take their calls. He looked at the name on the screen. Marcus. He held up one large hand to the video screen, a universal gesture for pause. The entire high-stakes international negotiation ground to a halt. "Gentlemen, one moment," Robert said. He muted his audio, stood, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. He answered the call. "Marcus, you're supposed to be in the air." "Dad, we're not. We have a problem." Robert's internal processes switched tracks. The Shanghai deal evaporated. His focus narrowed to a single point. He could hear the tremor in his son's voice, the barely suppressed rage. This wasn't a lost wallet or a missed connection. "Talk to me," Robert said. Marcus explained. He was brief and precise. He used the language his father had taught him. Aura Wing, Gate M11, Agent Brenda Scanlon, Supervisor Gary Pinter. "We've been denied boarding. They claim a random security flag. They've explicitly lied, stating it's a TSA matter. Supervisor Pinter just threatened to have us arrested for trespassing." Robert Washington closed his eyes for a single second. He saw it all. He had lived this. He had fought his way up from the loading dock, and at every level there had been a Brenda. At every level there had been a Gary, the smiling, weak-kneed enabler of the Brendas. He had hoped, foolishly, that by giving his children everything, the education, the first-class tickets, the confidence, he could shield them from this. He had been wrong. "They threatened you," Robert said. It was not a question. "Yes." "And the agent's name is Brenda Scanlon." "Yes." "And the supervisor is Gary Pinter." "Yes." "Put Mr. Pinter on the phone," Robert said. His voice was no longer that of a father. It was the voice of the CEO. Back at Gate M11, the standoff was reaching its peak. "A phone call?" Gary Pinter scoffed, folding his arms. "Sir, I don't know who you think you're calling, but unless it's the President of the United States, it's not going to change your situation." "He wants to talk to you," Marcus said, holding out the phone. Gary rolled his eyes, a performative gesture for the officers standing by. "Oh, wonderful, the irate father. I get these all the time." He snatched the phone from Marcus's hand. "This is Gary Pinter, Customer Service Supervisor at Aura Wing," he said, his voice oozing condescension. "To whom am I speaking?" There was a pause. The voice that came through the receiver was so low and powerful that Gary could feel the phone vibrate against his ear. "Mr. Pinter, this is Robert Washington." "Right, Mr. Washington. As I've explained to the passengers, we have a situation here that is—" Robert cut him off, his voice slicing through the noise of the terminal. "You are not to speak, Mr. Pinter. You are to listen. My name is Robert Washington. I am the CEO of Cygnus Logistics. Does that name mean anything to you?" Gary's brow furrowed. "Cygnus? Like the trucks?" "Like the trucks," Robert confirmed. "And the catering, and the fueling, and the baggage handling. Cygnus Logistics, Mr. Pinter, holds the exclusive contract for all Aura Wing ground operations at O'Hare International Airport. An operational contract valued at approximately $300 million annually. Your COO, James Albright, reports to me on ground-side efficiency. We are, in effect, your airline's most important vendor." Gary Pinter's face had gone from smug to confused to a sickly, pale white. His hand holding the phone began to shake. I wasn't aware." "You weren't paid to be aware," Robert continued, his voice dropping to an icy whisper. "You were paid to do your job. Ms. Scanlon, your agent, has just subjected my children, my heirs, Mr. Pinter, to a discriminatory and hostile act. You, in turn, enabled her and then threatened them. This constitutes a direct breach of Clause 14b of the Aura Wing Cygnus Service Partnership Agreement. Clause 14? Gary was hyperventilating. You don't need to know it. I know it. It's the Ethics and Partnership Standards Clause. It states that any act of willful misconduct or discrimination by an Aura Wing employee against a Cygnus partner, associate, or, in this case, family member, constitutes a total breach of contract. Mr. Washington, this is just a misunderstanding, Gary shrieked, his voice cracking. You are correct, Robert said. You have misunderstood the situation entirely. Robert, in his boardroom, pressed a button on his desk console. A new line opened. Patricia, get me David Liu, now. David Liu was his executive vice president of North American Ground Operations. David, Robert said, as Gary listened, frozen in horror. We have a 14B breach at O'Hare. Aura Wing. Yes, all of it. I want a full red stop on all Cygnus services associated with Aura Wing assets at Terminal 5. Pull the baggage crews. Pull the catering. Pull the fuel trucks. Ground them. Effective now. Cite ethics contamination. And David, call the union rep. Tell him my children were threatened. I want all 800 of our people to walk off that contract until I say otherwise. Gary Pinter dropped the phone. It clattered to the linoleum floor. Marcus calmly picked it up. Dad? I'm here, son. Now, here is what you do. You and Maya are to stand perfectly still. Do not move. Do not say a word to them. Your flight is not leaving. In fact, no Aura Wing flight is leaving. You just watch. It should take about 90 seconds. Marcus clicked the phone off. He looked at Maya, who was watching Gary. The supervisor was swaying on his feet, his face ashen. He was clawing at his radio. Base! Base! This is Pinter! I need Director Croft. Get me Croft, now. Brenda Scanlon was confused. Gary, what is it? What's wrong? Did that man threaten you? 90 seconds. The first sign was the pilot, the captain of Aura Wing Flight 112. A stern-looking man with a bristly grey mustache emerged from the jet bridge, his face a mask of confusion. What the hell is going on, Pinter? He boomed. My baggage crew just unhooked the loader and drove off. My fueler just detached from the wing. They're all driving back to the depot. I've got a cabin full of people and a half-empty tank. Why am I not being serviced? As if on cue, the giant flight information board above gate M11, which had read boarding, flickered. And then, in stark digital red, a new word appeared. Delayed the terminal, which had been a low hum of activity, registered the change in atmosphere. A collective groan went up from the passengers still in line. Delayed? What do you mean, delayed? A man in a business suit shouted. Brenda Scanlon stared at the screen, her mouth agape. That's not possible. We're on time. Her radio squawked to life. It wasn't Gary's panicked squawk. It was a general channel broadcast from the Aura Wing Operations Center. Attention all Terminal 5 gate staff, a frantic voice said. Be advised, Aura Wing has a code red. I repeat, code red. Our primary ground services vendor, Cygnus Logistics, has initiated a work stoppage. All Cygnus personnel have walked off. The voice grew more panicked. This is not a drill. All baggage, all catering, all fueling services are suspended indefinitely. Do not close the doors on any aircraft. Nothing is cleared for departure. The pilot stared at Gary. A work stoppage? Cygnus? They're the most reliable partner we have. What did you do? Gary Pinter was incapable of speech. He was a statue of bureaucratic terror. Brenda was still lost. But, our union. Cygnus can't just— They just did, the captain snapped. And then the real chaos began. It happened all at once, a domino effect of failure displayed for the entire terminal to see. On the master flight board, the 5:30 p.m. flight to London, delayed. The 5:45 p.m. to Frankfurt, delayed. The 6 p.m. to Dubai, delayed. One by one, every single flight in the Aura Wing International Bank was bleeding red. The airline was, in effect, grounded, paralyzed. Tim Brodie, the man who had been filming, panned his phone from the twins to the sputtering agents, and then zoomed in on the flight board. He was narrating in a hushed, awed whisper. "You are not going to believe this," he said, the video shaking slightly. "This gate agent, this woman right here, wouldn't let these 2 kids on the flight, and her supervisor backed her up. And I think their dad just shut the entire airline down." The crowd was now a mob, not an angry mob, but a deeply confused and increasingly frustrated one. Passengers from other gates, seeing their flights delayed, began to migrate toward M11, the source of the paralysis. The 2 O'Hare police officers, who moments before had been ready to arrest Marcus and Maya, now looked at Gary Pinter, awaiting a different kind of instruction. They were no longer security. They were crowd control. "Mr. Pinter," a woman shouted, "I have a $4,000 connection in London." "What is Cygnus?" another man yelled. "Is this a strike?" Into this vortex of noise and confusion, Brenda Scanlon finally found her voice. But it wasn't a voice of reason. It was one of pure, unadulterated, cornered animal rage. She had lost control. Her perfect, ordered world of rules and power plays had been shattered, and she knew exactly who to blame. She rounded on Marcus and Maya, her face a blotchy, furious red. Her finger shot out, jabbing the air inches from Marcus's face. "You!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You did this! This is your fault! You people always have to make it a problem. You can't just follow the rules." It was a fatal, catastrophic misstep. In her 22-year career, Brenda had been rude, she had been obstructive, and she had been petty, but she had always hidden, as Gary did, behind the shield of policy. This was raw, unfiltered, and undeniable. The entire gate area went silent. Tim Brodie's phone was steady, zoomed in tight on Brenda's face. He had his viral moment. Marcus and Maya didn't flinch. They didn't say a word. They just stood there, tall and unmoving, as this woman's career and personal prejudices imploded in real time. "Miss Scanlon," one of the police officers said, finally stepping forward. "That's enough. Get your hands off me," Brenda screamed as he gently tried to move her away. "I'm in charge here. You're a racist. That's what you are." The words came from a passenger in the crowd. The dam broke. The other passengers, who had been on the fence, now turned on her. "Shame on you. I saw the whole thing. She wouldn't even look at their tickets. Fire her. Fire her." Brenda stumbled back, her face white with shock. The us, the airline staff, versus them, the passengers. Dynamic had flipped. She was no longer the gatekeeper. She was the monster. Gary Pinter, seeing the mob turn, did the only thing his craven instincts told him to do. He saved himself. "Brenda, stop!" he yelled, finding his voice at last. This is an operational matter. Your behavior is inappropriate." He was distancing himself, creating a record for the inevitable report. "My behavior?" she shrieked at him. "You backed me. You told them you'd call the cops. That was before I knew the nature of the situation," he sputtered. "Mr. Pinter." The voice that cut through the chaos was not Robert Washington's. It was a woman's. sharp and cold as a shard of ice. A path parted in the crowd. A woman in a sharp black Aura Wing uniform, a silver name tag gleaming on her lapel, was sprinting toward the gate. She was not a supervisor. She was not a ghost. She was the one person Gary Pinter truly feared. Jennifer Croft, the Aura Wing Station Director for O'Hare. She was, in effect, the Queen of Terminal 5, and her entire kingdom was on fire. Jennifer Croft had not become the youngest and only female station director in Aura Wing's North American network by being nice. She was brilliant, she was ruthless, and she had the operational authority to fire, hire, and reroute a 777 with a single phone call. She had been in a budget meeting when her phone exploded with code red alerts. She had heard the words Cygnus, work stoppage, and Gate M11, and had run non-stop from the operations center. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't look at the red, glowing flight board. She didn't even look at her two trembling, ashen-faced employees. Her eyes locked, with laser precision, on the only two people in the entire tableau who looked calm. The two tall, impeccably dressed black teenagers standing at the head of the premium lane. She walked directly to them, her heels clicking on the floor like drum taps of doom. "Mr. Washington? Miss Washington?" she asked. Her voice was pure, controlled power. Maya, startled, just nodded. Jennifer Croft did not smile. She did not offer excuses. She offered a fact. "My name is Jennifer Croft. I am the director of all Aura Wing operations at this airport. On behalf of our entire global airline, I want to say I am profoundly and catastrophically sorry. What has happened here is not a hiccup. It is a complete and total failure of our service, our standards, and our decency." She then turned, a slow, deliberate pivot, to face her staff. The temperature at the gate dropped 10 degrees. "Gary, Brenda, Director Croft," Gary yelped, trying to step forward. It was a misunderstanding. The system, there was a flag." "Shut up, Gary," Croft said, her voice quiet but carrying utter finality. "Did you, or did you not," she said, turning to Brenda, "manually flag these two first-class passengers for a security review?" Brenda's face was a mask of confusion. The system, Croft interrupted, holding up her own corporate tablet. "Logs every keystroke. I just pulled the M11 log. At 17:02 you logged in. At 17:03 you manually initiated a Level 2 passenger review on passenger Washington M and Washington M. At 17:04 they scanned their boarding passes, which triggered the flag you had already set. There was no TSA flag, Brenda. There was only you. Brenda Scanlon's world folded in on itself. She had been caught. The lie was bare for everyone to see. She had no more rules to hide behind. Croft turned to Gary. "And you? Did you threaten to have these passengers, our first-class passengers, arrested?" "Jennifer, I was de-escalating. They were belligerent." Tim Brody, still filming, called out. "That's a lie. I've got the whole thing on video. He threatened them. And she," he pointed the phone at Brenda, "used a racial slur." "I did not," Brenda shrieked. "I said you people." The crowd groaned. Jennifer Croft closed her eyes, as if absorbing a physical blow. "All right," she said. She was done. "Brenda Scanlon, Gary Pinter, hand over your airport badges. Now." It was a public execution. "Jennifer, please," Gary begged. I can't." "Your badges," Croft repeated. "You are suspended, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the terminal. You will not go to the break room. You will not log out of your station. You will leave. Now." With trembling, clumsy fingers, the two agents unclipped their cider badges, the plastic cards that gave them their power, their identity. They held them out. Croft took them without a word. "Officers," Croft said to the policeman, "thank you for your patience. These two are now no longer airline employees. Please ensure they are removed from the secured area." Brenda began to sob. Not quiet, apologetic tears, but the hard, racking sobs of someone who had lost everything and knew it. Gary just stared at the floor, his face vacant. As the officers led them away, a small, spontaneous burst of applause erupted from the passengers. Croft turned back to the twins, her entire demeanor softening, though the steel in her spine remained. "Mr. and Miss Washington, your aircraft is here. Your seats are here. I have already personally radioed the captain and advised him that his priority passengers are on the way." She picked up their passports from the podium and personally scanned their phones. Beep, beep. "Welcome aboard Aura Wing." "But the flight is delayed," Maya said, confused. The ground crews." "Yes," Croft said, a grimace on her face. "About that." She took out her own phone. "I am going to call your father. I am going to apologize to him, and I am going to beg him to allow my airline to fly again." Marcus held up his hand. "He already texted me." He showed her the screen. It was a message from Dad. "Croft is smart. She'll fire them on the spot. When she does, tell her ground services will resume in 15 minutes. And tell her I expect her and the Aura Wing CEO to join our Monday ops call. Enjoy Zurich." Croft read the message and let out a long, shaky breath she seemed to have been holding for an hour. "He's efficient. It's his brand," Marcus said with a small smile. "Go," Croft said, gesturing to the jet bridge. "Have a safe flight, and please accept our apology." The twins, Marcus and Maya Washington, picked up their leather duffels. The entire terminal was watching them. They walked, side by side, down the carpeted ramp. The passengers in the delayed line, the ones who had been inconvenienced, the ones who had witnessed the whole thing, clapped as they went. They stepped onto the plane, turned left, and disappeared from view. Croft turned back to the gate. She picked up the radio. "Aura Wing Ops, this is Croft. The ethics contamination has been resolved. The situation is clear." The board above her head still glowed red. She had a terminal to unfuck, 1,000 passengers to rebook, and a multi-million-dollar hole to explain to corporate. But the first, hardest part was over. The Queen had reclaimed her kingdom. The flight to Zurich was blissfully quiet. Marcus and Maya slept for 7 straight hours, the smooth, white noise hum of the Rolls-Royce engines erasing the trauma of the gate. When they landed, rested and clear-headed, their phones exploded. They had gone viral. Tim Brody's video, titled "Aura Gate Racist Agent Grounds Airline.mp4, had been posted to Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. It had been 10 million views before their plane had even crossed the Atlantic. The video was a masterclass in citizen journalism. It showed everything. Brenda's initial, smug dismissal. Gary's "let's not make this personal weakness." His clear, unambiguous threat. "I will have to ask these officers to escort you." But the money shot, as the internet commenters called it, was the grand finale. It was Brenda's unhinged, "You people!" shriek, intercut with a zoom-in on the entire Aura Wing flight board, cascading into a sea of red, delayed text. It was the most perfect, concise, and visually satisfying story of cause and effect karma the internet had ever seen. The Washingtons, who had been anonymous Stanford students, were now the Cygnus twins. The media storm was instantaneous and global. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the BBC, every major outlet was running the story. Black teens denied boarding. CEO father shuts down airline was the headline. Aura Wing's stock, when the market opened, took a 9% nosedive, wiping out over $400 million in market capitalization. For Aura Wing, this was a 5-alarm PR fire. For Brenda Scanlon and Gary Pinter, it was an extinction-level event. Brenda's life was over before she even got home. By the time she was escorted to the land side of the airport, her name, her photo, a 10-year-old Employee of the Month picture, and her Facebook profile had been doxed. She was, globally, racist gate agent Brenda. She arrived at her small condo in Schaumburg to find a news van parked outside. Her phone had so many hateful text messages and calls that it simply overheated and died. She turned on the TV, and she was the lead story. They were interviewing former co-workers who all said Brenda was particular. She was fired, of course, not suspended, fired. The email from HR arrived at 11:12 p.m., termination for cause, gross misconduct and violation of corporate ethics. Her union, seeing the video and the stock price nuking fallout, sent her a one-line email. We will not be representing you. She tried to apply for jobs at other airlines. United, American, Delta. She was blacklisted. Her name was toxic. The gatekeeper who had wielded her tiny, podium-sized kingdom with such petty tyranny was now locked out of the industry and the world forever. She was a pariah, a living meme for corporate racism. Gary Pinter's karma was a different, more bureaucratic kind of hell. He was not, technically, fired. Jennifer Croft and Aura Wing's legal team were too smart for that. Firing him would imply he was as guilty as Brenda, and he hadn't been the one to manually flag the tickets. Instead, he was reassigned. Gary, the customer service supervisor, was demoted. He was stripped of his managerial title, his salary was slashed by 40%, and he was transferred from the prestige of the International Terminal 5 to the grinding, chaotic, soul-crushing environment of the Zone 4 baggage recheck service in the domestic Terminal 2. His new job, his career, was to stand in a concrete bunker for 8 hours a day, re-tagging the luggage of furious passengers who had missed their connections. He was no longer a supervisor. He was a human cog. Every new hire, every trainee, every pilot who walked by knew his story. He was Gary Pinter, the man who, through his own spinelessness, had enabled the Aura Wing Red Board, the single most expensive customer service failure in company history. He was a cautionary tale, a ghost in a too-large blazer, spending the rest of all his days in a purgatory of lost luggage and fluorescent lighting. Meanwhile, Robert Washington's Monday operations call with Aura Wing's CEO, James Albright, the COO, and Jennifer Croft was short, brutal, and not at all sweet. "You have a systemic problem," Robert's voice boomed over the speakerphone. "You have bias in your ranks, and you have weakness in your management. You're not just losing customers, your lucky Cygnus is willing to continue servicing you at all." Aura Wing's CEO, a man named Michael Price, was used to negotiating with unions and governments. He had never been dressed down like this by a vendor. "Robert," he said, his voice strained, "we have terminated the agent. We have disciplined the manager. We have issued a public apology." "That's a press release," Robert countered. "That's damage control. That's not a solution. A solution costs you money. A solution hurts. You haven't felt the pain yet." "Not really." There was a silence on the line. "What?" Michael Price finally said. "Do you have in mind?" The twins aced their fellowship interviews. When Marcus and Maya walked into the Kalen-Meyer Foundation boardroom in Zurich, the panel of 8 high-level European technology and finance executives already knew who they were. "Mr. and Ms. Washington," said the lead panelist, a severe-looking woman named Dr. Annika Haas. "We have read your proposal on AI-driven port logistics. It's ambitious. But first, we must ask, did you have any trouble with your flight?" The room smiled. The story of their travel trouble had preceded them. It had, in a strange way, become the ultimate character reference. Here were two 19-year-olds who had faced down systemic bias and corporate incompetence and had handled it with a composure that grounded an entire airline. The panel wasn't just interviewing two students. They were interviewing the Cygnus twins, the calm, cold-eyed center of a global media hurricane. They didn't just get the fellowship. They were offered double the initial seed funding. "The composure you showed at that gate," Dr. Haas told them afterward, "that is not something we can teach. That is what we buy. That is what we invest in." But the real karma, the hard karma, wasn't the fellowship. It wasn't the firings. It was the lawsuit. The Washington family did not sue for money. They had money. They sued for change. Robert Washington's legal team, in partnership with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, filed a sweeping civil rights lawsuit against Aura Wing International. It wasn't about the incident at Gate M11. It was about why the incident was allowed to happen. The lawsuit alleged a pattern and practice of discriminatory behavior by Aura Wing staff, citing dozens of passenger complaints over the years that had been dismissed or ignored. Brenda Scanlon's name was just one exhibit in a mountain of data. The lawsuit demanded a fundamental, court-supervised overhaul of Aura Wing's hiring, training, and promotion practices. Aura Wing's board saw the discovery phase, saw Robert Washington's army of lawyers, and saw their stock price still struggling. They settled in less than a week. The terms of the settlement were public, brutal, and precise. First, Aura Wing would make a $50 million non-tax-deductible donation, split between the United Negro College Fund and a new STEM scholarship fund for aspiring logistics engineers. Second, the airline was forced to publish a full-page public apology, not a "we are sorry if you were offended" PR piece, but a stark, black-and-white admission of systemic failures and racial bias in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Financial Times. It was to be signed by CEO Michael Price. Third, and this was Robert Washington's masterstroke, was the creation of the Washington Cygnus Initiative. Aura Wing was forced, by court order, to completely scrap its existing customer service training. It would be replaced by a new, top-to-bottom, bias and de-escalation program designed by a third-party ethics commission. A commission that would be chaired and funded by Cygnus Logistics. Robert Washington didn't just get an apology. He didn't just get his vendor's contract renewed with a 20% premium. He now owned, and would profit from, the ethics training for the very airline that had wronged his children. He had turned their humiliation into his new, most profitable business vertical. 6 months later, Marcus and Maya were flying home from Zurich for Christmas. They were, of course, flying Aura Wing first class. They walked through Terminal 5. It was different. The Aura Wing International signage now had a small, discreet partner logo next to it, the stylized C of Cygnus. They arrived at Gate M11. There was a new agent at the podium, a young, sharp-looking woman named Sarah. She was wearing a name tag that, underneath her name, had a small mandatory pin, WI certified, for the Washington Initiative. She looked at their passports. She looked up at their faces. She broke into a genuine, brilliant smile. "Mr. and Ms. Washington, welcome. It is, genuinely, an honor to have you on board. My WI training module was literally based on your case study." "Thank you, Sarah," Maya said, smiling back. "We're happy to be here." Zone 1 is all yours, the agent said. Have a wonderful flight. The twins stepped onto the jet bridge. They found their seats, 1A and 1B. As Marcus was stowing his bag, the captain emerged from the cockpit, the same captain from 6 months prior. He walked over, his hat in his hand. Mr. Washington, he said to Marcus, shaking his hand firmly. Ms. Washington, he nodded to Maya. I just wanted to say, I was the pilot on your flight 6 months ago. The one that didn't leave. We remember, Captain, Marcus said. What happened that day? It was a disgrace. But I just did my recurrent training, the Washington Initiative. It's the best, most important training I've had in 30 years of flying. You too. And your father. You didn't just ground our airline, you saved it from itself. He nodded, put his hat back on, and returned to the cockpit. Marcus and Maya settled into their seats. The flight attendant came by. Can I get you a pre-departure drink? Champagne, orange juice? Marcus looked at Maya. She looked at him. The pressure, the fight, the victory, it all settled. I think, Maya said, we'll both just have a water. It's good to be heading home. And that, right there, is karma. Not just fired from your job karma, but systemic, life-altering. Your bias is now my new business vertical karma. Robert Washington didn't just get an apology. He got a return on investment. The Aura Wing Red Board incident became a legend, a warning to every petty tyrant in a position of power, from a gate agent to a middle manager. You never, ever know who you're talking to. The world is full of Brendas and Garys, people who hide their prejudice behind policy. But every now and then, they pick a fight with a family that can pull the plug on their whole world. What did you think of Robert Washington's ultimate power move? Was it justice, or was it just business? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories where the karma hits hard, do me a favor and hit that like button until it turns blue. Be sure to share this with anyone who's ever had a bad day at the airport. And, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Click that bell so you never miss a story of when the powerful get put in their place. Thanks for listening.